It started as a simple search. I'd been living in my one-bedroom apartment for nearly 3 years, and with the rent steadily rising, I knew it was time to move. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a place with a little more space, preferably in a quieter neighborhood. After all, I was a single guy. No kids. No pets. Just me and my thoughts. Usually too busy with work to care about much else. I'd been saving up for a while, hoping for the right opportunity to present itself. That's when I saw the ad on Craigslist. It wasn't flashy, just a simple listing. Charming 2-bedroom house for rent. Quiet neighborhood. $850 a month. The price was right, and the description sounded perfect. Private backyard, hardwood floors, freshly painted, and close to public transport. The photos were a bit old, but it looked decent. Not a mansion by any means, but a step up from my cramped apartment. I immediately messaged the landlord, a woman named Karen. She replied quickly, offering to meet the same afternoon. "I'll be there by 3 p.m. Just give me a call when you're on the way." It all seemed too easy, but I was desperate for a change, so I didn't hesitate. I confirmed the time and headed out, excited for what might be my new home. I arrived at the house a little before 3 p.m. It was a small, single-story home on a quiet street, not far from the downtown area, but just removed enough to feel peaceful. The front lawn was well kept, and the house itself was a light shade of blue, with white trim and a welcoming porch. I parked and rang the doorbell, my heart racing a little. It had been months since I'd moved, and this was the first real opportunity I'd had to leave. Karen answered the door, and I was immediately struck by her appearance. She was in her mid-40s, tall, with dark brown hair that looked freshly washed. She had a warm smile, but there was something about her eyes, an intense, almost too friendly gaze, that unsettled me. Still, I didn't let it bother me too much. She introduced herself and invited me inside. The house was everything the ad had promised. Hardwood floors, freshly painted walls, and the layout felt spacious. The living room had a cozy, homey feel, and the kitchen was small but well maintained. She showed me the 2 bedrooms, both decent sizes. The second bedroom, she explained, could be turned into an office or a guest room. Everything seemed perfect. We spent the next few minutes chatting about the neighborhood, and I asked her how long she had owned the house. She told me that it had been in her family for decades, and that she'd recently decided to rent it out after her children had moved away. There was something oddly personal about the way she spoke, like she was sharing too much, almost as though she was trying to convince me to take it. "You're just the kind of person I think would fit in here," she said, smiling warmly. "I like to think of the house as a sort of sanctuary." I smiled back, though something in her tone made me uneasy. It wasn't just the house that felt like a sanctuary. It was her. When I asked about the rent, she was quick to assure me that it was affordable for the area. The lease would be for a year, with an option to renew. There was no mention of a deposit, which felt odd but not necessarily alarming. I had a good feeling about it. Too good of a feeling. I took the plunge. "I'll take it," I said, before I could second-guess myself. "I can move in this weekend." I moved in on a Saturday. The day was hectic, packing, hauling boxes, and setting up my new space. But by the evening, I had the basics in place. The bed, a few chairs, a desk for my computer. I was tired but satisfied. It was a small victory. After a quick dinner of takeout, I sat down on the couch, put my feet up, and began to relax. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping sound coming from the back of the house. At first, I thought it was just the wind or a tree branch brushing against the window. But the tapping was rhythmic, deliberate, almost intentional. It came from somewhere in the backyard, near the back door. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a neighbor or an animal. But as the tapping continued, I began to feel an odd sense of discomfort. I got up to investigate, walking through the kitchen toward the back door. There was no one there. But the air outside felt colder than it should have been for a summer evening. The yard was dark, illuminated only by the dim porch light. Nothing seemed out of place. The tapping happened again the following night. It wasn't as loud, but it was persistent, like a slow, methodical knock. I looked outside again, but found nothing. The house was silent, and the night felt oddly still. I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe an issue with the house settling, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That morning, I texted Karen to ask if there had been any recent work done on the house, maybe something to explain the sounds. She assured me that everything was in good shape, but she seemed a bit too eager to dismiss my concerns. A few days passed, and I started to get more comfortable in the house. But the tapping didn't stop. It became a routine, a nightly sound that I couldn't ignore. Eventually, I decided to mention it to Karen the next time I saw her. When I asked her about it during one of our brief chats in the garden, her expression changed. For a moment, it was as if she wasn't sure whether to say something or not. "I wouldn't worry about it," she said, smiling a little too wide. "The house can sometimes remember things. It has a history." I didn't know what she meant, but I was too unsettled to press further. I thanked her and quickly left the conversation, my mind racing with questions I couldn't quite put into words. The next few days, I tried to put everything out of my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was hiding something. One night, I heard the tapping again. This time louder, like someone was trying to get my attention. I checked the back door once more, but this time, I noticed something new. The door was slightly ajar. I stood frozen for a moment, my breath catching in my throat. I hadn't left the door open, and the wind wasn't strong enough to have blown it open. As I stepped forward to close it, I noticed something strange on the floor. A small, folded note. I picked it up and opened it. The note was short and simple. "You've seen it, haven't you?" A chill ran down my spine. My first instinct was to turn and leave, but before I could do anything, I heard a noise from inside the house. A door closing. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, and turned to face the house. Standing in the doorway was Karen, her eyes wide but filled with something I couldn't quite place. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. I was just checking the door," I stammered. "I found this." I held out the note. Karen's face paled as she stepped forward, snatching the note from my hand. "You shouldn't have found this," she said softly. "I didn't think you'd stay this long." "Stay?" I repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" She stepped back, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're not the first one to find out. No one stays long enough to understand. The house, it keeps people." Before I could react, Karen backed away into the darkness of the house, her words hanging in the air. That night, I packed my things and left. I never saw Karen again. The next morning, the ad for the house had been removed from Craigslist. But I still wonder, was it just an old house, or was it something more sinister? Maybe Karen was telling the truth. Maybe the house did keep people. It was just another desperate night. I was living in a cramped, run-down apartment, trying to stretch my last bit of savings, doing odd jobs wherever I could find them. My job at the small office had been downsized last year, and my side hustle as a freelance writer didn't pay enough to cover rent, let alone the bills. I found myself scraping by on scraps, sometimes not eating all day, just to save whatever I had for the rent check. One afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through job listings and classifieds, looking for anything that could offer a break. That's when I came across it. Private chef needed for high-end estate, meals and accommodation provided, $600 per week. Apply via email. The post was vague, but there was something about it that caught my eye. The pay was decent, especially for someone like me who had spent years working in kitchens. I wasn't a Michelin star chef, but I knew how to cook, how to handle myself in a kitchen, and how to cater to picky tastes. I didn't have much to lose, so I clicked on the email link and shot off a message, desperate for any kind of work. Within the hour, I received a response from a woman named Rebecca. She explained that the job was to cook for a small family in a private estate about an hour outside of the city. She included a little more detail, saying they needed someone who could prepare gourmet meals for their gatherings and daily needs. No big events, just intimate dinners. She also mentioned the job would come with housing, my own small quarters in the estate's guest house. The pay sounded generous. Too generous for a gig I had barely applied for. But I was tired of turning down opportunities, tired of not knowing where my next meal would come from. So I took the leap and agreed to meet her the next day. I followed the directions Rebecca gave me, driving further away from the city as the landscape grew emptier. The highway turned into narrow back roads, winding through thick woods and farmland. The sky had started to darken, and I felt a growing unease. The house would be in the middle of nowhere, she said, but the farther I drove, the more I began to question if this was a mistake. The roads were narrow, the trees dense. There was no one around, no gas stations, no convenience stores. Finally, I reached the estate, or what was supposed to be a mansion. But instead of grandeur, I was met with a weathered Gothic house tucked away in the trees. It looked abandoned, like something straight out of a horror movie. The iron gates opened slowly, almost as if they had been waiting for me. The house itself was enormous, but old. The once beautiful brick exterior was chipped and cracked. The lawn was wild, with weeds creeping up the sides. It seemed too quiet, eerily quiet. I parked in front of the massive wooden doors, hesitated for a moment, and then stepped out of my car. As soon as I did, a chill swept over me. The house was so still, so silent. I walked up the steps, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the stillness. I rang the bell, and within seconds, the door creaked open, revealing a man in a dark suit. He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, with a cold, blank expression. "You must be Julia," he said, his voice deep but welcoming. "Rebecca is waiting for you." I nodded, though I felt an odd sense of dread creeping in. He stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the house was dimly lit by a few flickering lamps. The walls were lined with old portraits, men in military uniforms, women in thick gowns. It felt like I had stepped into another time. The long hallway seemed to stretch forever. I noticed that there was no modern technology in sight, no phones, no computers, only antique furniture and the faint smell of something I couldn't place. Rebecca greeted me in a sitting room, a small, dark space with vintage furniture and thick curtains blocking out most of the light. She looked exactly like she had in her email, middle-aged, with sharp features and an air of authority. She introduced herself and made small talk, explaining that the family had been looking for a cook for some time, as their last one had left. They wanted someone reliable, someone discreet. "You'll be in charge of preparing meals for the family and any guests. It's a simple routine, and we expect you to maintain a high standard of privacy," Rebecca explained. "The house has a very specific atmosphere. It may take some time to get used to." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I agreed, willing to take the job and finally get some stability. That night, I settled into my quarters in the guest house. The small brick house was isolated from the main mansion, nestled deep in the trees. The silence here was unlike any I had ever experienced, complete and absolute. I unpacked my bag, turned on a small lamp, and sat down on the bed, breathing in the stillness. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to a soft sound outside, tapping. It was faint, but I could hear it clear as day. The tap-tap-tapping continued for what felt like hours, driving me mad. I pulled the curtains back to see what it was, but nothing was there. No animals, no wind, just the dark, silent trees. I tried to shake it off and went back to sleep, but the noise didn't stop. I pulled the covers over my head, hoping the tapping would go away. It didn't. The next morning, I met Mr. Halverson in the kitchen for the first time. He was the estate's caretaker, and he was kind enough to explain a little more about the family, though he was distant. He didn't seem to want to share much. He told me the prince, the man who owned the estate, was often gone on business and that he had strange habits, arriving home at odd hours. "Don't be surprised if you don't see him for a while," Mr. Halverson said. "Prince Julian is a man of his own schedule." That afternoon, I began preparing the first meal for the family. The house was still and cold, but the kitchen was well stocked and the work was familiar. As I cooked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching me. Every corner of the mansion felt like it had been left to watch. I caught glimpses of shadows moving past windows, saw figures standing still in the distance. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, running wild. But the unease didn't fade. Later that evening, Rebecca approached me again. "Julia, would you mind checking the wine cellar?" she asked casually. "There's a rare bottle we like to serve on occasion. It's down the hall in the basement. I think you'll find it in the back corner." I nodded, though something about the request didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the request. It was the way she said it. She seemed so calm, almost too calm. I walked down the dark hallway to the basement, feeling the temperature drop as I descended. The cellar was dimly lit and filled with shelves of bottles. I found the rare bottle quickly and turned to leave. But then I heard something. It was soft, but unmistakable. A low, muffled sound coming from behind a thick wooden door at the far end of the room. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked toward the door. The sound was faint, almost like a whisper or a groan. I reached for the knob, but before I could turn it, I heard someone approach behind me. I quickly turned, but it was just Rebecca. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice suddenly stern. "You should have asked first. That door is off limits. It's better not to disturb anything behind it." I didn't argue, though I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. I handed her the bottle, and she took it without another word, her face cold. That night, as I lay in bed, the noises started again, louder this time. The tapping grew into scratching, and this time, I could hear muffled voices, like whispers coming from beneath the floor. I tried to ignore it, but my mind raced. I needed answers. The next morning, I confronted Rebecca. "What's going on in the cellar? Why did you tell me not to go near that door?" She gave me a long, hard look before answering. "You don't need to know everything about this house. Some things are better left undisturbed." Her words sent a chill through me, and I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with a family in need of a chef. This was something darker, something dangerous. That night, as the house fell silent again, I heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open from beneath the floorboards of my quarters. My heart raced. I wasn't just a chef anymore. I was part of something I couldn't escape,